Truth Unveiled here, and today I have some very serious information to share with you. I'm going to be talking about all of the banking glitches and technical glitches that have been going on, as well as the situation in Italy and why this is so important, because it's only a matter of time until it makes its way to American shores, literally. But I'm here at the Independent, and it says Bank of Ireland confirms Visa debit cards, quote, now working normally. And it goes on to say that the Bank of Ireland has said its Visa debit cards are, quote, working normally after an interruption of service. And it says the bank's customers were hit by a technical glitch, which meant they were unable to use their debit cards. Now, this isn't the first time that we've been hearing and seeing about technical glitches, because all throughout 2016, we've been seeing worldwide nothing but banking glitches and technical glitches and everything wrong with the ATMs. I wonder what they're getting ready for. In fact, a few months ago, I even talked about and reported all of the banking glitches and technical glitches that have been going on in places such as India, the UK, and even America too. And the question you should be thinking about is why all of the sudden technical glitches, why all of the sudden problems all of a sudden. And not only that, but I'm going to tell you the bigger purpose behind all this, because there's something sinister that the elite are not telling you, and why they're even doing this and why this is even going on. But it even goes on to say that bank customers said their Visa debit cards had been declined in shops, with others saying that they were unable to withdraw money from automated teller machines or ATMs. In fact, even customers reported that their card was refused in a shop, but the sum of money for the transaction was debited from the account anyway. Now, while the Bank of Ireland reported that everything was okay and that the debit cards were now working normally, and of course they apologized for the inconvenience, this is so important, and you all need to pay very close attention to any time you hear banking glitches and technical glitches. That is a sign that they are preparing for martial law, literally. How do I know this? Because I'm also going to link the video below of the 72-hour warning for martial law. And how is this preparation? Because think about it this way: when you can no longer get your money out of the banks and you can no longer get your money out of the ATMs, what do you think is going to happen then? You can no longer get food from the stores. You can no longer buy anything of your pleasure. You will not be able to have access to go to a bank, and you will be seeing long lines, just as we've been seeing with the banks in Greece just last year and even this year. It'll be an economic collapse, literally, not to mention when they enforce bail-ins, because they already have bail-ins enforced in certain places of Europe, such as Cyprus and even Austria as well. What time do you really think it is? It's only going to get worse from here, and I hope you're seeing that, because when they shut down all the banks, and yes, it will be staged, they're going to blame it on a technical glitch, they're going to blame it on a banking glitch, and they're going to say that, oh, the bank's not working, but they'll be working sometime soon, just give it some time. When that happens, you'll no longer have any money to get out of the banks unless you already have money taken out of the banks, which is why I'm continuously warning time and time again to get your money out of the banks quickly, quick, fast, and in a hurry, but do so in increments, because like I said, it's going to lead to civil unrest, and this is one of the many ways of how it's going to lead to civil unrest, because when people can no longer get their money, it's not going to be good, because then they cannot buy food, they cannot buy necessities, and it's only going to be upheaval from there. But if you can see the warning signs ahead of time, then you can be able to prepare accordingly. But don't worry, it's not just Ireland that's been experiencing banking problems, it's also Italy as well, because it's all planned and staged ahead of time by the elite and the Zionists at the very top. But I'm here at Bloomberg, which says IMF urges action on Italy's retail investors bank bail-in. I hope you heard that, but let's keep going, because it even goes on to say that the IMF, which is also the International Monetary Fund, called for action over concerns relating to the bail-in of retail investors in Italy, noting that, quote, very high amounts of non-performing loans and slow judicial processes were straining bank balance sheets. Financial industry reforms are critical to entrench financial stability and support the recovery, the IMF said in a statement following its regular review of the Italian economy. The Washington-based fund said that NPLs appeared to be stabilizing at around 18% of total loans. And then the IMF also said that, quote, concerns related to the bail-in of of retail investors should be dealt with appropriately. And then, of course, there have been talks between Italy and the European Commission to recapitalize and restabilize certain banks in Italy, but it's stuck on whether creditors should face losses if taxpayer funds are used, according to people familiar with the discussions. And the rules that took full effect this year require bondholders and shareholders to absorb losses and failing lenders in the event of a rescue, a process dubbed a bail-in. Did you hear that? I talked more about bail-ins in my bail-ins video, but I also even talked about bail-ins when bail-ins was announced for banks in Austria as well. And what is bail-ins? Literally, bail-ins is when the banks can legally have the so-called right to take and steal your money in the event of an economic collapse. Because what they're going to tell you, if the economy were to collapse, which we know that it is, they're going to say, oh, well, we need to bail out the banks. But the way that we're going to do that is with the bail-in by taking your hard-earned money. And that's exactly what they're getting ready for, which is why you need to get your money out of these banks quick. But as you can see, the mainstream media is even talking about bailouts and bail-ins, but we also see these reports of these bank runs that are going on. And in Italy specifically, we've been seeing how the ATMs have been emptied. Lines of people are lined up at these ATMs like we've been seeing in Greece, not to mention how the ATMs are drained of cash with no funds available, not to mention how in Italy alone, if you look at the Italian economy, that stocks declined 68% since the beginning of 2016. What time do you really think it is? I hope you're seeing the warning signs ahead of time. And it's no surprise how the mainstream media is also calling this a crisis. I wonder why that's the case, because it even says from The Guardian that the next EU crisis in the Italian banks needs to be addressed. And it goes on to say that worries about the dire state of Italian banks have added to Brexit concerns across worldwide markets. And I talked more about Brexit and how Brexit has impacted the economy like no other, but it goes on to say that the figures suggest a remarkable 17% of bank loans in Italy are in fact bad, and that's over 300 billion pounds of bad credit, many multiples of the levels of debt held during the peak of the 2008 financial crisis. And notice how they do the repeat of the 2008 financial crisis. What time is it? But let's keep going. Recent market volatility triggered by the UK referendum decision has hit European banks hard and Italian banks harder. And as I talked about in my Brexit video, whether you want to believe it or not, but the whole purpose and impact of Brexit was just a way for the elite and the Zionists to continue and further their plans of the New World Order by collapsing the banks slowly but surely. It's a slow collapse indeed, but let's keep going. A perfect storm of zero Italian economic growth, low interest rates, and politically connected, often corrupt, lending have combined to create a situation where the Italian financial system is in need of a large rescue. Now, of course, will they do this in the form of a bail-in? We're not sure. Only time will tell. Will they do it with a bailout? Like I said, only time will tell. It's only my job to report to you what's been going on and to keep you updated with the world around you. Now, it's interesting when it talks about how the European Union, especially Germany, is opposed to a state bailout. Like I said, they're even talking about bailouts and bail-ins as we've been seeing. What are they really getting ready for? But this is very interesting when it says that the 2010-2012 European debt crisis hit the pigs, as they call it, which is Portugal, Italy, Ireland, Greece, and Spain. Greece defaulted, and the EU and ECB have lent huge sums to all these countries. Ireland, and to a lesser extent Spain, have recovered and resumed growth. Italy and Portugal have not, while Greece remains in a perilous situation. The Italian crisis is larger in more significant sense. It is a much larger economy than both Portugal and Greece. These are dangerous times for the banks and for Europe. Brexit has dominated the markets recently, but the developing Italian banking crisis is the next biggest European risk for Europe, and it needs to be addressed. But soon enough, this is going to become a worldwide issue and a worldwide problem, and we're already seeing the trickle effects with just Europe alone, because here I am at Zero Hedge, and it even says that Deutsche Bank's chief economist calls for 150 billion euros bankouts of the European banks. And we're going to go to that report in just a second. But here I want to show you exactly what's been going on. And like I said, just pay attention to how they do this and how they structure this, because they like to make it a worldwide problem, because later on you're going to see that Brazil has been having economic problems as well, along with Argentina, China, Japan. It's a worldwide issue. They're just not talking about it because they want to keep you mentally conditioned with the sheeple mindset. But now it's time to wake up to what's really going on. But it says the cards have been tipped, and it appears Italy's prime minister may have been right. In the aftermath of Brexit, much of the investing public's attention has turned to Italian banks, which are in desperate need of a bailout as a result of 360 billion euros in bad loans growing worse by the day, and not a bail-in as European regulations mandate, as that would lead to an immediate bank run. But is that what they're getting ready for? Only time will tell, to avoid a freeze and or collapse of Italy's banking sector. Let's keep going. This has pushed stock prices and default risk on Italian banks to record levels. So far, Italy's bailout requests have mostly fallen on deaf ears, as Germany's political leaders have resisted Renzi's recurring pleas for a taxpayer-funded rescue. However, as we have alleged, and as the Italian Prime Minister admitted last week, the core risk for Europe is not just the Italian banking sector, but the biggest bank of all in Europe, which is the Deutsche Bank. So we see the collapse happening little by little by little. It's not just some giant, great, big economic collapse that many people are looking for. No, it's happening step by step by step, but it's important that you see how it's happening and just what's going on, so that you will be aware of it when the big one does finally get here. And we may not know when that's going to be, but it's very important that we stay on high alert and see exactly the bigger agenda behind all of this, because we know darn well that who is in control and in charge of all of these banks? The elite, the Illuminati, the Zionist bankers who are in charge, the 3% Illuminati bankers. They control everything. They control the economy. They control the markets. They know what the market is going to be before there even is a market. They even know exactly what the percentages are going to be the day before, if not the week before, and they know when they're going to collapse it, because they're the ones who are planning it and staging it. But what they like to do is they like to use these banks as a ploy in order to elite message each other, like the Royal Bank of Scotland, for example, which is one of the top 20 largest banks in the world. Well, back in January of 2016, they released a very cryptic statement which said, quote, "Sell everything." What time do you think it really is? Not to mention the Economist cover that just came out in 2016, which had all symbolism and cryptic symbolism of an economic collapse. Like I said, we don't know the day or hour, but we know it's going to happen soon. It's not a question of if, but when. And I'm here at that same article that we just looked at, but now we're here and translated in English. But it even says German bank chief economist calls for the 150 billion euro, and this is to be for the bailout with Deutsche Bank. And it says Europe risks a new banking crisis, and the chief economist David Landau at Deutsche Bank, therefore, a huge EU bailout program suggests, and private creditors should not participate. And so the report goes on to say that the chief economist of the Deutsche Bank calls for a multi-billion-dollar bailout for the European banks. The institution should be equipped American style with fresh capital, because at that time the government has stepped in with $475 billion. And quote, "In Europe, the program must not be so large, but with the 150 billion euros, it can be used for European banks to recapitalize." And of course, this is David Landau of the Welt am Sonntag that was reported as well. Then it goes on to talk about Italy and the condition of the local banks there and how they are being affected as well, just as we've talked about. And even the Deutsche Bank chief economist saying that, quote, "Europe is seriously ill when it comes to the economy." But what you will find is that this problem is not just a European problem. Oh no, because we're seeing it worldwide. Because I'm back here at the Guardian, and it says Rio de Janeiro governor declares state of financial emergency ahead of the Olympics. So we see exactly the same problems going on in Brazil as well. And it even says emergency measures needed to avoid, quote, a total collapse in public security, health, education, transport, and environmental management. And it goes on to even talk about and say that 49 days before the opening of the Olympics, so back in mid-June, the governor of Rio de Janeiro has declared a state of financial emergency and begged for federal support to avoid what they call a total collapse in public security, health, education, transport, and environmental management. And this plea for funds is an embarrassment for the host of South America's first games and adds to the long list of woes that includes the impeachment of the president that happened a few weeks ago, as well as the deepest recession in decades. Did you hear that? The deepest recession in decades for Brazil, the biggest corruption scandal in memory, and of course they like to use the Zika epidemic and a wave of strikes and occupations of government buildings when we know who funds Zika, hint hint, the Rockefellers. But let's keep going. Brazil's economy is expected to shrink by about 4% this year as a result of weak commodity prices, low demand from China, political paralysis, and the Lava Jato or car wash corruption investigation, which forced the suspension of many construction contracts and led to the arrest of dozens of senior executives. Rio is particularly hard hit because of its headquarters of the state-run oil company Petrobras, which is at the center of the investigation. But not only that, it's also faced by falling tax revenues. The state government has slashed health, police, and education budgets. Teachers and doctors have faced lengthy delays in receiving their salaries, prompting strikes and occupations of schools and hospitals. And the acting governor has classified the situation in the official gazette as a, quote, financial calamity that could prevent the fulfillment of the obligations as a result of the Olympic and Paralympic Games Rio 2016. Now, it's very interesting when the article goes on and tries to frame this as to be a political tactic, and that's what mainstream media loves to do, because why do you think that this is all happening around the same time as the Olympic Games? Do you think that's a surprise and a coincidence? I think not. And by the way, if you don't think that the Zionists are behind all this, if you don't think that they're pulling the strings on this and tugging the strings on this, especially when it's right at the Olympic Games, especially when they're fulfilling their plans of the New World Order, well, I suggest you really think again. But I hope you're seeing the bigger agenda behind all this, because what's the agenda? Problem, reaction, solution. The Zionists create the problem by telling us of all the planned stage economic collapses worldwide, and then their solution to these problems is to continue and further their plans of the New World Order by merging everything and everyone together, and by using those Illuminati puppets such as Obama and all those other so-called elite and world leaders to do so. Please seek Yahuwah and his true son Yahusha so you can be ready for the big collapse when it happens. But this is Truth Unveiled here, saying shalom.